They were America's biggest stars, loved by millions and trusted by the public. But behind closed doors were violent crimes, courtroom battles, and secrets powerful studios fought to hide. Some took a life and walked free. Others lost everything. How did fame protect them, and what really happened when the cameras were off? Number 1, Spade Cooley, the king of Western swing, who concealed the ferocity of a deranged maniac. Spade Cooley was not just a star. In the 1940s, he was the undisputed king of Western swing, selling out concerts, hosting his own television show, and projecting the image of a smiling, all-American cowboy. To fans, he embodied success, charm, and wholesome entertainment. But behind the applause and studio lights was a man consumed by control, rage, and jealousy. As Cooley's fame grew, his private life quietly collapsed. His marriage to Ella May became increasingly volatile, marked by fear and intimidation. When Ella May decided she wanted to leave him, Cooley saw it not as heartbreak, but betrayal. Friends later described his temper as explosive, and on one horrifying night, that temper crossed a line that could never be erased. In a brutal act of violence, Spade Cooley took his wife's life inside their own home. What made the crime even more disturbing was who witnessed it. Their teenage daughter was present and later forced to testify in court against her own father. The beloved entertainer was exposed as a murderer, convicted of first-degree murder, and sentenced to life in prison. America watched in disbelief as a cultural icon fell overnight. Yet the story did not end there. In a shocking twist that still fuels outrage, Cooley was granted parole after serving less than a decade behind bars. He attempted to return to music, performing at a benefit concert years later. But backstage, moments after stepping toward a comeback, Spade Cooley collapsed and died of a heart attack. His legacy remains a chilling reminder that fame can hide monsters in plain sight. Number 2, Robert Blake, the child star, whose fame ended in a courtroom. Robert Blake grew up in front of the camera. From childhood roles to his gritty, streetwise performance in the television series, Beretta Blake built a reputation as a serious actor who survived Hollywood when many child stars did not. By the late 20th century, he was respected, seasoned, and seemingly untouchable. Few could have imagined how violently his life was about to unravel. In 2001, Blake's world collapsed when his wife, Bonnie Lee Bakley, was shot and killed outside a Los Angeles restaurant. Blake claimed he had left her alone in the car and returned moments later to find her dead. Almost immediately, suspicion surrounded him. Investigators uncovered a marriage filled with conflict, manipulation, and money disputes. The case exploded into a media frenzy, turning Blake from respected actor into a national headline. Prosecutors painted Blake as a man capable of planning violence, while the defense argued that Bakley's past made her a target for enemies unrelated to Blake. The trial became one of Hollywood's most sensational courtroom dramas. In 2005, Blake was acquitted of murder charges, a verdict that shocked many and divided public opinion. But the story did not end with his freedom. In a separate civil trial, Blake was found liable for Bakley's death and ordered to pay millions in damages. Though he avoided prison, his career was effectively over. Hollywood turned its back, and the spotlight he once commanded disappeared for good. Robert Blake's story remains a haunting example of how fame can collapse instantly, leaving behind a legacy forever tied to suspicion, tragedy, and unanswered questions. Number 3, Walter Wanger, the producer who pulled the trigger in real life. Walter Wanger was one of Hollywood's most powerful producers during the Golden Age. His name was behind major films like Stagecoach, Foreign Correspondent, and later Cleopatra. Wanger was not a face audience recognized, but behind the scenes he helped shape careers and control fortunes. In an industry built on illusion, he was a man accustomed to authority and influence. That image shattered in 1951 when Wanger became consumed by jealousy over his wife actress Joan Bennett and her relationship with talent agent Jennings Lang. Convinced Lang was having an affair with Bennett and destroying his marriage, Wanger tracked him down to a parking lot outside the MCA building in Beverly Hills. What happened next stunned Hollywood. In a moment of explosive rage, Wanger confronted Lang and shot him. Lang survived, but the damage was done. One of the most respected producers in Hollywood was now facing criminal charges. Newspapers across America ran the story, exposing a world where powerful men settled personal vendettas with guns instead of contracts. The studio system could not fully contain the scandal. Wanger's legal team argued temporary insanity, blaming emotional collapse and obsession. The strategy worked. He served just 4 months in jail, a sentence many believed reflected his status rather than justice. Although Wanger returned to producing afterward, his reputation never fully recovered. The shooting left a permanent stain on his legacy and revealed how thin the line was between Hollywood power and real-world violence. Number 4, Errol Flynn, the swashbuckling star who faced Hollywood's most explosive trial. Errol Flynn was the definition of a Hollywood legend. With films like The Adventures of Robin Hood, Captain Blood, and The Seahawk, Flynn became the ultimate screen hero of the 1930s and 1940s. His charm, athleticism, and devil-may-care smile made him one of Warner Brothers' biggest box office draws. Off-screen, he embraced a reckless lifestyle that only added to his myth. That image nearly collapsed in 1942 when Flynn was accused of misconduct involving 2 underage girls. The allegations sent shockwaves through Hollywood and threatened to end his career overnight. Newspapers followed every detail as the case went to trial in 1943, turning the courtroom into a spectacle and Flynn into one of the most controversial figures in America. Flynn's defense team argued that the accusations were fabricated and that the encounters were consensual. Flynn himself remained defiant, insisting on his innocence while the public watched closely. The trial became one of the most sensational legal battles of Hollywood's golden age. When Flynn was ultimately acquitted of all charges, reactions were sharply divided, with many believing his fame had played a crucial role in the outcome. Despite the scandal, Flynn's career survived. In fact, his acquittal gave rise to the phrase "in like Flynn," symbolizing his apparent ability to escape disaster. He continued starring in major films, though his reputation was forever altered. Flynn's story exposed the uneasy truth of classic Hollywood, where charisma and power could shield stars, even in the face of devastating accusations. Number 5, Paul Kelly, the leading man whose love triangle ended in tragedy. Paul Kelly built his career on intensity. With his rugged looks and commanding presence, he moved easily between Broadway and the big screen, earning a reputation as a dependable leading man. At the height of his fame, Kelly seemed to have everything Hollywood promised. What followed would nearly destroy him. Behind the scenes, Kelly became entangled in a volatile love triangle with actress Dorothy McHale, who was married to fellow actor Ray Raymond. Tensions between the two men simmered for months, fueled by jealousy and resentment. In 1933, the situation exploded when Kelly and Raymond became involved in a physical altercation. Raymond was severely injured and later died from complications related to the fight. Kelly was arrested and charged with manslaughter, a stunning fall from grace for a Hollywood star. The trial made headlines nationwide, exposing the darker side of celebrity relationships. Kelly was convicted and sentenced to serve time at San Quentin prison, a punishment many believed would end his career permanently. Against all odds, Kelly rebuilt his life after serving 2 years in prison. He returned to acting, found steady work on stage and screen, and even won a Tony Award years later. In the most shocking twist of all, he eventually married Dorothy McHale, the widow of the man whose death sent him to prison. Their union became one of Hollywood's strangest and most unsettling real-life epilogues, blurring the line between tragedy, redemption, and scandal. Number 6, Ted Healy, the comic mastermind, whose final night raised too many questions. Ted Healy thrived in chaos. Long before television, he dominated vaudeville stages with loud, fast, physical comedy, becoming a major attraction in the 1920s and early 1930s. He is best remembered today as the man who helped launch the Three Stooges, giving early exposure to performers like Moe Howard and Larry Fine. On stage, Healy played the boss. Off stage, that role was far more troubling. Behind the laughter was a volatile personality fueled by alcohol and control. Healy was notorious for mistreating his performers, taking credit for their success while paying them poorly. His abusive behavior eventually drove the Stooges away, a split that would haunt him as their fame exploded without him. As their careers soared, Healy's life began to unravel in full view of Hollywood. In December 1937, Healy attended a party at the Trocadero nightclub in Los Angeles, a gathering filled with celebrities and powerful figures. Later that night, he was found severely injured and rushed home. Within hours, Ted Healy was dead at just 41 years old. Official reports blamed complications related to alcoholism, but rumors immediately spread that he had been involved in a violent confrontation shortly before his death. Whispers of a cover-up, influential witnesses, and unspoken deals have followed the case for decades. No one was ever charged, and the full truth of what happened that night remains unclear. Ted Healy's legacy is frozen between comedy history and mystery, a reminder that Hollywood's brightest laughter often echoed alongside its darkest silence. Number 7, Mabel Normand, the silent film icon caught in Hollywood's most unsettling mystery. Mabel Normand was one of the brightest forces of early Hollywood. Fearless, sharp, and naturally funny, she rose during the silent era as both a beloved screen presence and a creative equal among comedy legends. Working alongside figures like Charlie Chaplin and Roscoe Arbuckle Normand proved she was more than a star. She was a pioneer at a time when few women held real influence in the industry. Her world changed abruptly in 1922 following a shocking incident involving the death of director William Desmond Taylor, which sparked a wave of public opinion throughout Hollywood. The event became one of the most talked about and scrutinized cases of the time, attracting intense media attention. Normand, who had a close personal relationship with Taylor and had been with him briefly before the incident, suddenly found herself the target of relentless scrutiny. Although authorities never charged her with wrongdoing, public opinion proved far more damaging than any court ruling. Gossip columns and headlines painted Normand as a symbol of Hollywood excess, feeding into a growing backlash against the film industry. Studios became cautious. Offers slowed. Trust quietly disappeared. In an era obsessed with image association alone was enough to derail a career. The pressure never fully lifted. Just 2 years later, another disturbing event, involving someone from her inner circle, once again pulled her name into controversy. Illness, stress, and isolation followed. By the late 1920s, Normand had stepped away from the screen almost entirely. She passed away, young, remembered for her groundbreaking talent, but forever shadowed by a mystery she could never escape. Number 8, Frances Farmer, the rebel star. Hollywood chose to silence. Frances Farmer never fit the Hollywood mold. In the late 1930s, she stood out not just for her striking presence, but for her refusal to smile on command or obey studio expectations. While other actresses followed the rules, Farmer questioned authority, challenged contracts, and spoke openly about the industry's control over performers. That defiance made her unforgettable and dangerous. As her career grew, so did the backlash. Farmer became a frequent target of negative press labeled difficult and unstable. A series of public incidents involving alcohol and confrontations with police only fueled the narrative. Each headline pushed her further from leading roles and closer to the edge of Hollywood's tolerance. The studios that once promoted her now treated her as a liability. Her downfall reached a breaking point in the early 1940s, when court appearances spiraled out of control. Reports described Farmer as combative and uncooperative, reinforcing claims that she was unfit to work. Soon after, she was placed into a state psychiatric facility. What happened during her confinement has been debated for decades, with accounts describing harsh treatments and long periods of isolation that left lasting scars. By the time Farmer returned to the public eye, her career was beyond repair. Hollywood had moved on, and the damage was permanent. Though she later appeared in smaller roles, the momentum she once had was gone. Frances Farmer's story remains one of the most disturbing examples of how the studio system dealt with those who refused to conform, turning talent and independence into a cautionary tale buried beneath silence. Number 9. Wallace Beery, the moment Hollywood chose silence over truth. Wallace Beery was not just a movie star. In the early 1930s, he was one of MGM's most profitable assets, an Oscar winner, whose face guaranteed box office success. On screen, he played loud, rough-edged men with hidden hearts. Off-screen, people whispered about a temper that studios worked hard to keep out of sight. Those whispers grew louder after a disturbing night that Hollywood never fully explained. A young actor early in his career and full of promise was involved in an incident with Beery and 2 other men. By the next morning, that actor was gone. The official explanation was sudden illness. Unofficially, rumors of a heated confrontation spread fast through studio lots, dressing rooms, and private parties. No cameras were rolling, and no one spoke publicly. What followed was not outrage but strategy. MGM acted quickly, closing ranks around its star. Beery was quietly sent overseas, removed from headlines while the story cooled. No charges followed. No public reckoning ever came. When Beery returned, his career resumed almost seamlessly, as if nothing had happened. The message was clear. Some questions were not meant to be asked. Despite his professional success, stories from co-stars painted a darker picture. Child actor Jackie Cooper later described Beery as cruel and manipulative behind the scenes, a sharp contrast to his public image. Wallace Beery's legacy stands as a reminder of how fame and studio loyalty could silence uncomfortable truths, allowing some stars to move forward while questions were left buried in Hollywood's past. Number 10. Barbara Payton, the starlet. Hollywood watched fall apart in public. Barbara Payton entered Hollywood at the perfect moment. In the late 1940s, studios were searching for fresh faces, and Payton had everything they wanted. She appeared in films like Trapped 1949, Kiss Tomorrow, Goodbye 1950, alongside James Cagney and Dallas 1950, quickly earning attention as a rising star. Magazine spreads and publicity photos painted her as the next major blonde sensation. But off-camera, her life was sliding into chaos. Payton became the center of a sensational romantic scandal involving actors Franchot Tone and Tom Neal. The situation exploded into public view in the early 1950s, climaxing with a violent confrontation between Tone and Neal that left Tone seriously injured. Newspapers devoured the story, and Payton's name became inseparable from scandal rather than talent. As studios backed away, Payton's career collapsed rapidly. Roles disappeared. Contracts were quietly dropped, and her personal struggles became tabloid fuel. Legal issues followed, including arrests related to financial desperation and public disturbances. Each incident made headlines, turning her decline into a form of public entertainment. Hollywood no longer protected her. It documented her unraveling. By the mid-1950s, the woman once promoted as a future star was living on the margins, far removed from red carpets and film sets. Barbara Payton died young, her final years defined by poverty and illness. Today, her story is often revisited through documentaries, vintage tabloids, and her autobiography, I Am Not Ashamed. She remains one of Hollywood's most tragic examples of how quickly fame can turn into exposure and how merciless the spotlight becomes once the industry looks away. Number 11, Marie McDonald, the beauty whose scandals became bigger than her fame. Marie McDonald was once billed as one of Hollywood's most glamorous starlets of the 1940s. Nicknamed the Body by the press, she appeared in films like Getting Gertie's Garter, 1945, Living in a Big Way, 1947, and Promise Me Anything, 1945. Studios promoted her looks heavily, pushing her into magazine covers, publicity tours, and high-profile appearances that made her a familiar name even beyond her screen roles. But attention quickly shifted from her films to her personal life. McDonald became a fixture in gossip columns, not for performances, but for erratic behavior, troubled relationships, and repeated brushes with the law. Her marriages, financial problems, and public incidents created a narrative that Hollywood could no longer control. The image of effortless glamour began to crack, replaced by constant speculation. The turning point came in the early 1950s with one of Hollywood's strangest headline-grabbing events. McDonald claimed she had been abducted from her home and held for hours before being released. The story dominated newspapers nationwide, but authorities questioned its credibility almost immediately. No arrests were made, and doubts surrounding her account only intensified public fascination and skepticism. From that moment on, McDonald's reputation never recovered. Legal troubles involving fraud accusations and financial schemes followed, making her a symbol of Hollywood excess gone wrong. Studios distanced themselves, and opportunities vanished. Marie McDonald's story stands as a cautionary tale of how fame can spiral into spectacle, where the spotlight no longer celebrates talent, but feeds endlessly on controversy. Number 12, John Drew Barrymore, born into Hollywood royalty, undone by the name. John Drew Barrymore entered Hollywood with an inheritance few could escape. As the son of legendary actor John Barrymore, expectations followed him from the moment he stepped on a set. With striking features and natural screen presence, he appeared in films like The Big Night, 1951, and High Lonesome, 1950. And for a brief moment, it seemed the Barrymore legacy would continue without interruption. But fame never settled comfortably on him. Unlike his father's controlled brilliance, John Drew Barrymore lived impulsively, openly resisting discipline and authority. His behavior off-camera soon overshadowed his performances. Studio executives grew wary as reports of missed calls, erratic conduct, and public incidents became harder to ignore. What once looked like rebellion began to resemble self-destruction. Legal trouble followed. Arrests for intoxication, reckless behavior, and later issues involving unpaid child support painted him as unstable and unreliable. Each headline chipped away at his credibility, making casting him a risk studios no longer wanted to take. While his famous last name opened doors early on, it could not protect him from the consequences of repeated public breakdowns. In later years, Barrymore appeared only sporadically, far from the leading roles many once predicted. His life became a cautionary contrast to the brilliance of the Barrymore dynasty, especially as his children, including Drew Barrymore, rebuilt the family name in a new generation. John Drew Barrymore's story is one of unfulfilled promise, a reminder that legacy can be a burden, as heavy as it is powerful, when talent and turmoil collide. Number 13, Robert Mitchum, the scandal that turned into a legend. Robert Mitchum built his reputation on danger without ever raising his voice. With his slow drawl, heavy eyes, and effortless cool, he became one of Hollywood's most magnetic leading men. Films like Out of the Past, 1947, Crossfire, 1947, and later, The Night of the Hunter, 1955, cemented his image as the ultimate anti-hero, a man who looked like trouble even when standing still. In 1948, that image collided with real life. Mitchum was arrested during a widely publicized police raid involving illegal substances, a scandal that sent shockwaves through Hollywood. At a time when studios carefully controlled every detail of a star's public image, this kind of exposure was supposed to end careers. Newspapers framed Mitchum as reckless and irresponsible, and industry insiders predicted he was finished. Mitchum served time behind bars, becoming one of the first major Hollywood stars to face real consequences in the public eye. But instead of apologizing or begging for redemption, he did something unexpected. He stayed calm, refused to play the victim, and treated the situation with a dry, almost dismissive humor. That attitude transformed the narrative. What should have destroyed him only reinforced his rebellious mystique. When Mitchum returned to the screen, audiences embraced him more than ever. The scandal had made his persona feel authentic, not manufactured. His career stretched across decades from noir classics to westerns and war films, proving his resilience was real. Robert Mitchum's story stands apart from the others not because he avoided scandal, but because he survived it, turning public disgrace into a defining chapter of Hollywood legend. Number 14, Fatty Arbuckle. The comedy giant brought down by Hollywood's first great scandal. Roscoe Arbuckle, known to the world as Fatty Arbuckle, was one of the most powerful stars of the silent film era. Long before Chaplin became a global symbol, Arbuckle was already earning massive salaries and headlining popular comedies like The Butcher Boy 1917, Coney Island 1917, and Goodnight Nurse 1918. His physical comedy warmth and timing made him nearly unstoppable, and studios trusted him with full creative control. The dominance collapsed in 1921 after a weekend party at San Francisco's St. Francis Hotel turned into a national media storm. A young actress, Virginia Rappa, became seriously ill following the gathering and later passed away. Almost immediately, Arbuckle's name was pulled into the headlines. What followed was not just a legal case, but a public feeding frenzy fueled by sensational newspapers and moral panic about Hollywood excess. Arbuckle faced 3 separate trials, an unprecedented spectacle at the time. The first 2 ended without verdicts as juries failed to agree. By the third trial, the tone shifted dramatically. Arbuckle was fully cleared of wrongdoing, with the jury issuing a rare written apology acknowledging the damage done to his life and reputation. But by then, the outcome barely mattered. The public had already moved on, and the industry had quietly closed its doors. Though Arbuckle later returned to filmmaking under the name William B. Goodrich, directing shorts for studios like Warner Brothers, his time as a beloved star was over. His fall reshaped Hollywood forever, directly influencing the creation of strict moral clauses and image control within the studio system. Fatty Arbuckle's story remains a defining moment in entertainment history when fame collided with scandal and proved that public opinion could end a career long before the truth ever caught up. Number 15, Judy Garland, the star Hollywood created and quietly broke. Judy Garland was not born a legend. She was shaped into one. From a young age, MGM recognized her extraordinary voice and emotional power, placing her at the center of its biggest productions. When The Wizard of Oz, 1939, turned her into a global icon, audiences saw magic, innocence, and hope. What they did not see was the cost of carrying an entire studio's expectations on a child's shoulders. Behind the scenes, Garland's life was governed by strict control. Studio executives regulated her weight, appearance, and energy, often pushing her beyond physical limits. To keep her working long hours, she was prescribed stimulants by day and sedatives by night, a routine that slowly rewired her body and mind. While her performances in films like Meet Me in St. Louis and A Star is Born dazzled audiences, her private world became increasingly fragile. As she grew older, the system that built her offered little protection. Missed rehearsals, exhaustion, and emotional breakdowns were framed as personal failings rather than consequences of years of pressure. MGM eventually released her from her contract, leaving Garland to navigate fame without the structure that had defined her entire life. Public setbacks followed, turning her struggles into headlines rather than warnings. Yet even in decline, Judy Garland remained unforgettable. Her live performances, especially her concerts in the 1950s and 60s, revealed a raw honesty that connected deeply with audiences. She became a symbol not just of talent, but of survival. Garland's story closes this list for a reason. It reminds us that Hollywood's brightest stars often burn the fastest, and that behind the applause can be a silence no spotlight ever reaches.